Roblox is one of those games that everybody likes to hate for some reason. This could be due to the amount of trash that's been on the front page, or people just hate it because it's cool. We'd see this with Minecraft before, so it's not surprising that a game or platform gets so much hate due to being popular. But by basing our own judgment based on a few bad games, leaves out a whole slew of excellent games that never went popular and often is left under the radar, thanks to Roblox's terrible algorithm that allows trash like this to stay on the front page. I mean seriously, whose idea to remove the genre option? One of these games that went under the radar is Blood and Iron. At first glance, this may be a Holdfast Nations at War ripoff, but keep in mind, this game came out in 2015, 2 years before Holdfast. I remember used to playing this game a lot back in 2016. Was it still worth playing all these years later, now that I owned Holdfast, or there's a good reason why I stopped playing and moved on to better games? In the game, you have the option to select a unit, based on what class you choose. For infantry, there are 6 roles you can play for each unit. Skirmishers and cavalry have 3 roles, artillery has 2, and for militia, it depends on what nation you're playing, but it's between 1 to 5. Infantry and skirmishers are the ones you'll be playing the most, as the rest are relegated to a specific map. What this game did better than Holdfast is the huge range of uniforms that is unique to each soldier, and in some cases their own unique role and equipment, depending on what class or unit you choose. I'm not going to judge how historically accurate these uniforms are, but I have to give credit to the amount of time and research the developers have to do to add these uniforms into the game. Not to mention that you can play as 9 nations in Blood and Iron, compared to 4 in Holdfast. You can also customize your soldier by changing his hair or facial features. It's a nice feature in the game, as most FPS don't bother adding it. If you want more customizable options, you can buy the Game Pass for 30 Robux each. The game has a total of 22 maps, which is much smaller compared to Holdfast, not to mention that the maps in Holdfast are significantly bigger than in Blood and Iron. As for the maps themselves, you can either fight in the open fields or villages and buildings. Although it has a good number of maps you can play in, some of the map designs are a bit repetitive. The most infamous examples are the battles that take place in a farm, as they're essentially the same map but with different buildings. In addition, a lot of the maps look empty and unfinished, which makes me lead to believe that the maps are just an afterthought when compared to the amount of time and care the developers put to creating each unit. With that said, there are some maps I do like. My favorites will be Iberian Harbor and Hilltop Post, to name a few. Usually the maps that stand out to me. Despite my critiques, most of the maps of the games are decent, but it could have been better. The goal of the game is to eliminate all the opposing players before time runs out, which each map changes for every 4 rounds. For the soldiers themselves, rankers are your standard infantrymen, armed with a musket and bayonet. Depending what class or unit you choose, if you're a skirmisher for example, you'll be armed with a musket which lacks a bayonet, but makes up for having a longer range and faster reloading speed. Officers are equipped with a pistol and spyglass, sappers have the ability to build defenses, and have a much stronger melee weapon, drummers and fifers play music, and color bearers can wave the flag for their country. Other classes have their own unique roles and equipment exclusive to that particular class. Cavalry are equipped with lances and musketoons, militia has a wide array of melee weapons, and for artillery, you probably know what they do. As for weapon mechanics, I like how you have to cock your gun before firing, as it gives a level of immersion and realism, not to mention that the reloading animation is really satisfying. What's interesting is that when you disrupt your reloading, you continue what you left off rather than starting all over again like in most games, which can be useful in some situations. Melee combat is also great, as it feels so responsive and satisfying when you win a sword fight, and it's certainly better than in Holdfast. Since this game is a war for survival, the game requires you to use the best of your abilities in order to survive and win the game, as trying to do a frontal assault will result in death. Although I like the weapon mechanics, the main issue I have with it is you cannot move while aiming your gun, which although adds realism and a level of skill in the game, often is a hindrance, especially in intense combat or maps when cavalry is present, so it's not uncommon to see players using melee weapons. Other issues include not being able to tell which is friend or foe, as well as some balancing issues, since there's no set limit to how many players can play a certain role. There's other flaws I did not mention, but these are the ones worth noting. Although the game only has one mode, it still has a good amount of replay value, but it does get boring after an hour or two, especially when you spend most of the time waiting for the round to be over after you die. I suggest adding new game modes such as line battles or team deathmatch, or maybe even naval warfare, some variety to keep the players playing, rather than just stick to one mode. Blood and Iron is a great game that deserves more attention. Although it has its flaws, they don't ruin the entire game for me. The game has a healthy player count, as well as a dedicated following, but the fact that games like Bee Swarm Simulator and the shitty Tycoon games get a higher player count because the current Roblox algorithm allows them to do so, really shows how shallow the front page is today. Overall, Blood and Iron gets an 86 out of 100. Well, that wraps up the first episode of Europa Reviews. If you want more of this type of video, be sure to like and share. The clips provided will be in the description below. Well, we're bound.